Whoa, it's me. And guess what I got?
But ultimately, Terry claims that God came to him in a revelation and chose him to create the successor to the Second Temple in Jerusalem. He also claims that God commanded him to use only 640 by 480 resolution, 16-bit colors, and a single audio voice. He even created his own programming language known as Holy C, which was seen as in between C and C++.
I got
Not only
motherfucking
did he make his own
Newports.
language, but his own compiler, and the operating system consisted of over 120,000 lines of code, written all by himself. In the
Yeah, I'm
aforementioned Viceroy
painting right
language,
now.
the
Here's a
language
little
consists
shitty
of C
drawing I
code,
made.
6 bytes per awake and 8 bytes per
Now I'm
sleep,
painting something.
consumed large amounts of caffeine, and spent the vast majority of his time working on his temple.
I'm
This has since
painting.
been compared to a single man
I have
building a
no idea what to do.
skyscraper, and is the reason some hail Terry as the smartest
I don't know what
programmer
to
of all
say, but
time.
I like to shit post videos of me painting and being dumb.
Lines of code. A computer engineer compared his accomplishment to a one-man built skyscraper. That's why the statement that he is the smartest programmer that has ever lived might not be exaggerated.
He was also able to make entire animations or games with Temple OS, clips of which have become particularly important in the emerging view that he was brilliant beyond comparison.
I have Flappy Bird. I wonder why I didn't put this in the games. I think I have the games.
I am the greatest painter of all time. I'm gonna make 1,000 paintings and it's gonna take me forever. I don't care.
Demonstrations.
I am the best writer and painter ever.
And included for demonstration purposes. Write games, don't play them.
The operating system homepage
The almost
is
200 paintings
songs,
go on my
which Terry
Tumblr
wrote
and you can
and,
check them,
despite being in text
even though
form,
they
which
suck.
was seen as very unique.
There are animated icons, as well as just general icons on this menu, despite the fact that it is text mode.
Yeah.
He created a special file format that allows him to insert those things along with songs and other stuff into what is essentially just an ASCII file.
Huh.
And
Terry had created a self-sufficient system with an unfathomable amount of time and effort, and in his eyes, a way to communicate with God, mainly through random number generators.
This is Temple OS. It's a 64-bit PC operating system. It has an oracle. That's why it's called Temple OS.
Sometimes the best people fail.
Purposes for doing
The best people fail again and again.
and poems and
But
stuff.
the thing is, they don't give up,
Response from
despite
God.
how much
It
failures
is
they have in
ultimately a way
life.
for users to tinker and make their own games, offerings, animations, hymns, or
I
anything
guess
else
I
they
gotta be
want
one
in
of
order
those
to make
people.
contact with God, and is seen as somewhat of a coder's playground. It should be noted that people far more knowledgeable about programming have taken notice of Temple OS.
I got a fart
The
now.
takeaway from larger personalities seems to be that it is extremely original and unique, though initially a struggle to understand, and that it is a sign of Terry's genuine talent.
It makes you wonder, like, just how talented this guy was before, well, you know.
things happened.
It's like, if nothing else, this demonstrates quite a breadth of skill.
Though it is true that since his death, many have come to say how unique
I'm gonna
and
make a
impressive
big
his work
painting
was,
too
this
one of
was
these
not
days.
always the case. In fact, most, if not all, of the reception during the process of his creation was that of ridicule, mixed with some curiosity and sympathy. It was during this long process that Terry's presence became truly
I hope you can hear me.
The project began as J Operating System in 2004, as something that was intended to become a higher speed version of the Commodore 64, an 8-bit computer released in 1982. According to Terry, the project was mainly meant to run video games, and not to run internet connection, as this would be reinventing the wheel. It was also intended to encourage oddball software. In one of the first instances of internet attention being attracted to Terry, J Operating System was covered by OS News, in which the main sentiment surrounding it was that it seemed to be somewhat outdated, with odd programming choices, and did not have any security or online connectivity, but that as a personal project, the creator was free to do what he liked. As always, in a field
AI.
of programming, there would be some that
Fuck
were more
you.
skeptical and critical as others, while
Fuck
some
AI.
reveled in the strangeness of J Operating System's creator. In 2006, the project would be renamed to Lose Those, and it was at this time that Terry's online activity would start to pick up, in response to which forum users would have more to say about it.
Read them and weep AI. This is for you.
What's the secret to peak health? Going micro with Noom. Micro habits.
In 2008, Terry created a Reddit account sharing the Lose Those name, posting often about the operating system, with some posts being oriented around its technical aspects and some being more religious in nature. These would all link back to the Lose Those website, which included a description, some demonstrations, and the name of its creator. Terry would note at that point that it was unable to work with other previously made technology due to some of the other reasons listed. Redditors would initially reply with some hesitant admiration for the work that Terry had put into the system, though most saw it as a waste of time or something with an unclear purpose. At this time, Terry's replies seemed remarkably lucid and even amicable, as he justified his programming choices, though he would become somewhat vulgar on his website and in forums in the near future. It was at this time that Terry would also frequently take to r/atheism, in which he would mainly make assertions that God was real, accompanied by long and seemingly random strings of text following the phrase God says.
God says, confute, exodus, print, propound, resumed, glorify, elect, forgiving, pleasant, itself, equals, long, catch, abject, oft-times, miracles.
He would garner little attention,
Picking
and at
my
times
nose.
instead would reply to himself in increasingly confusing veins. This would also provide more insight into Terry's
One of these
faith,
days I'm gonna be known
to subscribe to the common mindset
the
that
weird
atheists who study
schizophrenic
computer science
painter
fall into, but now sees the synchronicity
thinks
of
he's
faith and the
a
brain.
good
At
artist.
this time, Terry
I'm a
would also
shitty
post
artist.
Lose Those on
I don't
OS.org,
care.
where he would find slightly
Fuck
more
you.
genuine curiosity about the system, but would post increasingly more egotistical and elitist responses, as well as some of his signature nonsensical religious posts, leading to negative reception and his eventual ban. In February of 2009, Terry would finally receive some engagement regarding his project, with the signature mix of admiration for the construction of an original compiler and language, and derision of the
I got a
outdated
job
style
now.
and lack of practical
Stupid
use.
bank accounts.
However, his incessant and obsessive posts would aggravate other users after a while. Terry also spammed the Hacker News website with duplicate posts and constant advertisements for Lose Those, which would eventually be removed by moderators. It was there that someone first asserted that he was wasting his talent, in response to which he reverted to calling everyone Linux cultists, as he had become prone to do, a reference to the family of operating systems, which he found insulting due to its lack of originality and creativity. As has been and will be repeated many times, it does not take a programming genius to recognize the clear traces of talent in Terry's work, but it is even easier to spot his clear inability to suppress his paranoia and ego. By 2010, the Lose Those account disappeared.
I'm the Bob
and
Ross
beyond
of
making a few separate
schizophrenia.
accounts, including one meant to pretend to be someone else to gain attention to the operating system, attention on Reddit and Hacker News waned. At this time, he also started to post his first videos to document Lose Those. In July of 2011, Lose Those was posted in the Something Awful forums by a user who made some interesting claims about Terry, as well as commented on how the user interface was extremely difficult to navigate. To make his thoughts more clear, he stated that Lose Those was, without a shadow of a doubt, a piece of poo-poo. Terry would post to the forum soon afterwards, but to little sympathy, and he was soon banned there as well. It was then that Terry would begin tweeting about the CIA and FBI, notably expressing his distrust for federal agents, as well as his therapists and even his parents, claiming that they were doppelgangers and enemies. While these posts were unrelated to his operating system, they illustrate the beginning of Terry's more racist and paranoid rhetoric, which would become intertwined with any attention his work would receive.
Damn it, I gotta eat.
As now, instead of simply an interesting yet old-fashioned operating system, it would be known as the mysterious operating system coded by a paranoid and racist schizophrenic. People were beginning to discover that there was much more to Terry and his work. On the website Metafilter, among people discussing his past behavior, Terry would interject, criticizing OS Dev, and proceed to argue with other users for 11 hours straight. If it hadn't been before, it became abundantly clear that Terry should not have had any online presence, though the majority of internet antagonism he would receive had yet to come. In 2012, Terry changed the operating system's name to Sparrow OS,
I have these weird
creating
delusions
several
if
videos with the same name.
that if I kill myself, I'd be
First became aware of it,
famous.
documenting his incomprehensible rants and his comments about God, including the randomized speeches he claimed were divine guidance. Shortly after this, in March of 2013, the name was finally changed to Temple OS, accompanied by a new website. From this time, there is documentation of a game known as After Egypt, which Terry saw as one of the most important, and this clip illustrates his pride in his work as well as the mental state he was in.
There's camp. The break camp. The number of people gets randomly bigger or smaller. Anyway, oh, watch this. They'll do golden calf. They all run in a circle. That's from the Bible story. A few clouds. God was a cloud. I was gonna have to lead him around or something. A woman commits adultery to a child. Punish. Hold court. A child commits adultery to a child. Really punish. Hold court. A child commits idolatry. Really punish. Okay, so they wandered 40 years in the desert. So this must be what they did. They wanted meat, and God gave them meat, and they got sick. Died. Anyway, this really works. If you talk to God, he'll talk to you. So if you do an offering, he'll talk.
The game had no clear objective or ending, and Terry expressed that it was to be used as an oracle, and that you get out of prayer what you put in. This also illustrates Terry's intention for Temple OS to be a way for people to communicate with God and make religious offerings. In September, Terry started to document his rants on the new Temple OS website, in which he expressed his status as the self-proclaimed best programmer on the planet, and that he had been chosen by God to receive divine intellect and create the third temple. Specifically, he backs this up with the accomplishment of having written his own compiler. This is a sentiment he would continue to express for the rest of his life, and that many of those who followed his story began to agree with, mainly after his death. On October 3rd of 2013, he started uploading videos of Temple OS, starting with hymns created through random number generators that converted numbers to musical notes.
Now I have to wait for it to dry.
Long-term protection through legacy open source, enterprise optimized security, compliance, and support. We cover your entire enterprise open source ecosystem and beyond. Unparalleled coverage of enterprise open source software. Over 300 employees, more than 2,300 customers. Modernize and automate your enterprise security with TuxCare.
While he's explaining the intentions of the operating system and giving information about it.
This is Temple OS. It's a 64-bit PC operating system. It has an oracle. That's why it's called Temple OS. The main purpose is for doing offerings and hymns and art and poems and stuff, and then getting a response from God in the oracle.
Masterpiece of shit.
Mainly consist of more rants, as well as something that would later become a
Yeah, fuck it. I'm not gonna wait for it to dry. I'm just putting the color right now. I don't give a fuck. And this fucking toothbrush. This fucking thing's broken. Or
He would also post a video in which he showed a
fucking
elephant showcasing his 16 colors once again.
I like elephants, and God likes elephants. Here's a realistic elephant.
That elephant is holy. Blessed be his name. Amen.
Along with the Shut Up Bird meme originating from Terry's cockatiels singing during his
Shut up, bird.
as well as I Don't Trust That Fish.
Shut up, bird. Shut up, bird.
It would remain one of the things consistently mentioned in posts about Terry, usually in an endearing way. It was at this point that some online news articles would be released about Temple OS, including including one from Tech Republic, which stated, Temple OS is a testament to the dedication and passion of one man displaying his technological prowess. It doesn't need to be anything more. This is perhaps the first mention of Terry's work that does not imply that Terry was wasting his talent, or that if not for his mental illness, he would have been able to achieve much more. On that note, though, it might also be the last. It was at this point that Terry would go on to post over 100 videos directed at Larry Page, who was at the time the CEO of Google, illustrating what were perhaps delusions of grandeur regarding the fame or importance of Temple OS. Along with these videos, many clips illustrating the image Terry has ultimately cultivated for himself would be posted, including him claiming that CIA agents know about and are after him personally, and that he is better than the Pope because the Pope does not know what a compiler is.
Pope says he has a holy kernel. I don't know. Did he talk to God in the temple, in God's official? I am Solomon's successor. You're just a pope. And I fucking wrote an operating system with compiler. Don't even know what a compiler is.
Lastly, of course, he calls everyone who disagreed with him the colorful racial slurs that he became known for. Terry would continue to post videos to YouTube, uploading many of his thoughts or Temple OS demonstrations, revealing more details of his life and contributing to his growing popularity.
Shut up, Bert.
Aforementioned last article containing details from his many emails.
God damn it, Bruce. Shut up.
It contained much of the prior information listed regarding the development of his mental illness and eventual diagnosis, though it should be noted that this information was largely not verified in any formal way. In 2015, Terry began posting webcam videos branded as sermons and declared himself high priest, claiming that his main job was to make continual offerings to God.
So, I'm high priest of God's temple. I do offerings 24/7, and I am in charge of the 100,000 lines of code. And in the Bible, the high priest did offerings 24/7. My job is to entertain God.
Many clips of Terry's demonstrations, or of him using the rhetoric he became known for, came from this time period, and it was at this time that Terry was solidified as an internet figure and a bona fide mystery, where the dominoes that would eventually result in the end of his life began to fall. When seeing many of the initial responses to lose those on Reddit and OSDev, it becomes clear that when it was presented as a fun personal project, many users were curious about Terry's work and the massive amount of work he put into it. Aside from a few contrarians, which are guaranteed to be in places like that, it seems likely that most of the negative feedback stemmed from Terry's spam, or his hostile responses to critics, which turned otherwise neutral users against him. In the QE Farms archive of a thread on Terry, a fairly neutral description can be found of Terry's project. If anything, Temple OS is a half-decent experimental OS. Sure, it's definitely not usable for day-to-day usage, and the 640 by 480 screen resolution does not help it one bit, but it does feature unique features such as a C interpreter and how it handles ASCII. A great deal of curiosity and criticism is expressed at the often outdated technical specifications Terry insisted on, and his reasoning as to why he adhered to them is not always consistent.
Okay, I just don't want my sister to come in here.
Since then, he has changed it, simply saying that possibility.
Because I'm making a video.
It should also be noted that Terry
God
expressed
damn
that
it.
simplicity was the sign of true genius, and this likely also contributed to him seeing his destiny precedent.
Alright, at this point, I don't even care.
And compilers.
That's my little sister back there.
This refusal to collaborate with
And she does not speak English.
held back his work, and was likely either due to his ego stopping him from acknowledging the skill of others, or his paranoia that federal officers
Doesn't want to be on the camera.
The latter reason is also likely why he made every component himself. When I say that it held back his work, I am of course referring
Doesn't want to
to
be
the
there.
Jesus in Christ. I don't even know her. We have nothing. There is no
I look so far.
relationship.
fruitless endeavor and convert Diana from atheism. Shortly after this, Terry would receive pornographic images from the fake Diana who was emailing him, and would be banned from streaming. Following this, he would say that he did not really have a use for live
I don't know, my
streaming,
dad doesn't
and
want
only
my
was doing it for
sister
Diana to watch him,
on
illustrating how
these
connected he was
videos.
to this imposter, and how much his interactions with them had taken over his daily life. Sadly, it seemed that at this point he was aware of his brain becoming more scattered. and possibly aware of the fact that his
She
private
comes in, I'm just not
interactions
gonna
with quote-unquote Diana kept
stop
becoming
the
publicly known.
video. I don't care.
Live stream got suspended for I mostly did that for Diana to watch the live stream. I don't really have use for live stream, but I can vlog. You know, if I write in private, then it like finds its way into the local consciousness, and
¿Qué,
in order to keep
¿Qué
my
tienes
brain
tijeras?
from getting confused, I should write
No
in
juegues
private.
con las tijeras,
That way,
María.
Estos mis
Sí,
tijeras.
pero te vas a cortar.
Estos son
It's more
chiquitos
obvious.
para mí.
Yo sé, pero todavía puedes dañarte con las tijeras.
Then I might think I'm doing it that
Mira,
way. But if I write
pues
Todavía
mira,
duele.
it ends up on the
no
internet.
mira, ya me estoy cortando, mira.
Sí, pero todavía
Amidst
te puedo
futile
cortar.
struggles to scream, Terry would post
Oh,
vlogs,
no.
recording himself
Sí.
talking,
No,
dancing,
mira.
or singing,
Me
and
estoy
drumming to music.
cortando.
He would also post what he called paladin walks, in which he walked around and occasionally sat down to read. While it was likely healthy for him to get some exercise, he could not stay on the same train of thought, and would refer to himself in the third person and talk in a paranoid manner.
Play a song.
Releasing in up to 2 months. Call Dan Mortgage now at 702-850-2000. Try.
However, there were still sparks of awareness, and he would at times recognize his unhealthy thoughts and stop himself.
What are you looking at? Cards.
He also developed
That's
a
annoying
habit
that
of
she
using
plays
the phrase stack over
freaking
to
piano and
refer to
plays
when
that
his brain
song
was
again.
becoming overloaded and he was having trouble thinking.
What is it that's special about the human
Wow.
brain that allows creativity to happen?
Terry claims
Still
that
pain.
both nurse, as well as his father and the CIA, were fabricating the situation to antagonize him.
Oh, again? Come in my room and then I have to restart the video.
Nothing ever gets done. I seem to be in some kind of prison.
Oh my gosh.
I love you, I love you, I love you. Yeah, you party with the most
This is how my pain is looking like
I
right
don't
now.
know what your confusion is. She's like, I want to party with you.
This is my painting.
They're like, okay, whatever, man. I ain't one of them. I just get stinks. But like, so I get you over here and be my foot.
By the time January came around, Terry did not show for his arraignment and would stop posting videos altogether after releasing several rants in a new location.
Orladeyo is the treatment that I've been looking for since I was diagnosed with HAE.
Orladeyo Baritol.
After 2 months, he reappeared in Oregon, recording from his phone without his band and his laptop. He would return to streaming for small amounts of time starting on March 19, 2018, often with considerable technical issues. Among his typical political and racial rhetoric, with even less coherence and ability to keep a train of thought, some of Terry's rants would come close to providing insight into his past and his mindset, though these were few and far between.
It's a pity how much time I wasted. But you know what? I discovered something. Boredom and excitement balance. You know, I talked about a lot of justice in the world. And one of the things I discovered was I would have a trance of ecstasy, manic, going several days a week.
I have to go to work today. I work at a pizza place. Need no money.
Terry's mental clarity, and these clips are, in my opinion, extremely saddening, as they show a very intelligent soul who could have lived a much better life.
When people are engaged in a meaningful activity or something creative, they become very, very lucid in a way that they're unable to be in other sort of regular human interactions. Creative activity which involves the synchronicity of the physical body and the mind, can be deeply therapeutic.
Unfortunately, though, these reprieves would not last, and by early August, Terry was back to speaking of his war against demonic forces, with more of his increasing difficulty to
Might smoke a motherfucking Newport.
In a war with demonic forces, my definition of demonic is, let's say you have some Christian virtue, and the enemy takes advantage of this virtue. You know, on a most striking level, this would be like putting bombs on children, right? Because we don't want to kill the innocent, right? This is a virtue. So the way to typify the demonic attack is to put bombs on children and send them into your camp, because your Christian virtue is doesn't want you to kill the child. But
on August 9th, Terry would record his last video. He begins by saying that it has been hard being homeless, and that the town he is in is a pure place, but that they must have been shocked by the arrival of such a horribly sick person. He concludes his speech with a thought that has become widely spread among his followers, and shows a unique yet not quite defeated perspective.
so, well, it's good to be king. Maybe. I think maybe I'm just like a little bizarre little person who walks back and forth. Whatever, you know.
Shortly after this video was released, the Dallas Chronicle posted an article about an unnamed homeless man being struck by a train. Seeing this, Terry's followers would suspect that this was him, and the publishers were inundated with phone calls asking about the man's identity. Unfortunately, it would soon be confirmed that on August 11, 2018, Terry A. Davis had passed away. Investigators apparently could not determine whether his death was accidental, and according to the police report, Terry was walking with his back to the train before turning towards it right at the moment of impact.
Oh shit! Oh,
Due to the circumstances and the fact that he claimed in his last video that he had learned how to purify himself, many have speculated that he most likely ended his own life. In a Facebook post made by Terry's older sister, she claims that he had been on a great western adventure before his death, which included Nevada, Arizona, California, Washington, and finally Oregon. She writes, "He will be greatly missed by his family that loved him very much, enough to let him be free and continue his journey on his terms. He will also be missed by many of his online community that recognized his amazing brilliance, sense of humor, wit, and dimpled smile that was truly captivating." As mentioned before, there are numerous factors that led to Terry's eventual demise, and blaming just one or even a couple would be impossible. However, it is difficult to hear that anyone believes the best thing for him was to journey on his own terms, as a schizophrenic man who had stopped taking his medication. I agree that it should not have fallen on his geriatric parents to take care of him, especially after he fought with his father. But if the stories of his multiple arrests are true, I have to wonder why he was not institutionalized. Of course, when he failed to show for his arraignment, 8chan paid his bail, perhaps once more preventing him from getting vital help, likely for the sole reason of being able to see more content as he continued to roam the streets. Unfortunately, I think Teresa was slightly off in her assessment of Terry's internet presence, because though he was a captivating figure, the majority of the people who were still following Terry near the end of his life were simply there to revel in his strangeness.
God, I hate ads. They just play everywhere. It's annoying. Like, I fucking don't care.
4chan post archived shortly after Terry's death, a user expresses his frustration that Terry did not end up raping and killing Diana, and instead only ended up fapping and killing himself. These people were not only reveling in Terry's strangeness and mental illness, but they hoped to create even more radical results with their efforts. Of course, that's not to say there weren't people who showed concern or wanted the best for him. It's just that, at least from our view 7 years later, that is not the most prominent group in his story. At the time of his death, which brought attention back to Terry among those who had stopped watching, there was certainly a sentiment of mourning, though there would, of course, be some who were only frustrated to be losing a source of entertainment. It should also be noted that some were reporting on a troll who pretended to be Terry on Facebook, possibly convincing some of his family that he was the real Terry. Whether this had any effect on his death or the reaction to it is unknown, but he was apparently having real interactions with Terry's family. Perhaps due to sympathy, or perhaps due to an increasing number of people deciding to look into Terry's history after his death, Many would express that, had many of the circumstances in his life been different, he could have been the next Steve Jobs or the next Bill Gates.
Now, I want you to try to imagine something. Think of a Bill Gates, a Steve Jobs, a Richard Stallman, a Linus Torvald, a Steve Wozniak. I want you to envision them. Just one day, all of a sudden, stripping off all their clothes and jumping out a window, screaming about glow-in-the-dark CIA hackers and how they're coming to get them. How do you think people would react? What do you think the reaction to their legacies would be? And I want you to imagine that same scenario where those people, those pioneers in their industry, hadn't actually reached the fame or recognition they deserved. That is Terry A. Davis.
There is certainly a kernel of truth in this. Terry's intelligence was clear in his work, and in the conversations he had, even when in the depths of his mental illness. With the dedication he showed to his projects, he could have become, at least by our society's standards, a very successful person. However, as many have pointed out, if he was not mentally ill, it is possible that the extreme dedication he showed would not have existed in the first place. Regardless though, with his skill and hard work dedicated to a different cause, Terry's narrative could have been much more widely known, and in a much more positive light. Not everyone shared this thought, of course. On 4chan, it was still widely expressed that Terry was simply a mentally ill R-word who had stopped taking his meds, and they looked down on him for his delusions and decisions. There were also those who believed in his conspiracies, and would repeat his most popular phrases, though, since this is 4chan, it was probably ironic. There were a few in the moment who would claim that he was the best programmer of all time, and that he was right about every one of his conspiracies regarding the CIA, though it's difficult to assess who is being
I saw
serious and
two
who is not,
trucks
and
follow
this is
me.
certainly not the opinion of the majority. Regarding the technical aspects of Terry's creation, people would adopt a more moderate view, claiming that Temple OS was an impressive testament to Terry's hard work, but rather than being like one man building a skyscraper,
Sometimes I see
it was
things.
more like a single house or an apartment complex. And while the analogies can get a bit excessive, the point is that the users think the hype around the operating system had been hyperbolic. At this time, videos would begin coming out documenting Terry's life and internet antics, at which point many people not familiar with programming or with his internet presence would become aware of his bizarre story. Archives were created to honor Terry's life and document his streams and blogs, and some, more well-versed in programming, brought attention to Temple OS and its uniqueness. Terry was finally receiving widespread attention, with a decent chunk of those viewing the narrative expressing genuine admiration for his project, and a smaller amount even deciding to keep the dream of Temple OS alive, creating a subreddit that remains active to this very day. While it is regrettable that Terry could not receive the help he needed or the support from non-psychotic internet users during his life, he would at least be remembered and grieved by many after his passing. Since then, videos about Terry would sporadically be posted to YouTube, each perhaps educating even more people on his story and his life's work. These videos, while all popular, were likely not the result of any new trend, but rather the creator themselves learning of Terry's fascinating story. However, in the current day, now over 7 years after his death, Terry seems to be experiencing a resurgence on TikTok, as people post edits of him dancing and of Temple OS, as well as some of the more popular clips of him expressing his philosophy on life, or making his claims of being spoken to God or being the smartest programmer of all time. Google Trends shows searches for Terry A. Davis being possibly at an all-time high, aside from late 2024 and earlier this year, dating back to 2004. This video from August 16th of this year has over 980,000 likes and countless comments mourning or celebrating Terry. One from the previous month received over 150,000 likes. People were becoming more aware of him in the scope of the current internet culture.
I'm Terry Davis. I'm the smartest programmer that's ever lived. I was chosen by God to make his temple.
Side note, the main joke of that video was making fun of how a schizophrenic man spoke and showing shots of a train approaching. Regardless though, people are now taking note of Terry, seemingly out of nowhere. Just as interesting as the increasing amount of posts surfacing about Terry is the apparent shift in opinion on him. If you peruse any of these posts, they will be filled with comments saying that Terry is indeed the smartest programmer of all time, with no small amount of them also claiming that the CIA was indeed after him. The development of this new narrative can be traced back to a video from a year ago that garnered almost 700,000 views, claiming that Temple OS was the equivalent to one man building a skyscraper and essentially endowing him with that title. Additionally, as has been discussed in some threads after Terry's passing, this could also be due to a large amount of people who were not familiar with programming delving into the rabbit hole that is his life, and either taking Terry's own word for it that he was the smartest, or hearing the sheer amount of work put into Temple OS and not being able to comprehend its scale. As somebody who is in no way knowledgeable about coding, it is difficult for me to determine what the reality is regarding Terry's true intelligence and skill. While I believe that he may be overhyped, it is understandable why some people would stumble upon this enigmatic figure and ascribe some mythical or divine intelligence to him. And it is equally easy to speculate on this due to the fact that we will never be able to see Terry's true potential.
So I support Jay with his ADHD symptoms is to have compassion and to be understanding and to be consistent. Create routines, like help them remember to take the medication. I make sure they put the Calvary on the bed.
But the reason, though, there is truly a resurgence of Terry fans crusading against those who denounce his skill, outnumbering them in comment sections to the point that any naysayers start to appear as poorly manufactured rage bait rather than genuine confidence. Seeing this community and how people revered him, I would not be able to blame anyone for coming to the conclusion that Terry was indeed a genius. Another sentiment is beginning to appear on these posts, though admittedly one whose roots are much easier to identify, and that is the sentiment that Terry should not be pitied or revered, or in some cases grieved at all, due to the fact that he was a racist. While there were always those who had a problem with Terry's rhetoric, posts about him will now have several people condemning him for his use of the N-word and branding him as an irredeemable racist.
Oh, fuck.
This is less of a mysterious development, and it almost certainly comes from the fact that the discussion is being held on TikTok and not on 4chan. It is easy to see a few clips of Terry and write him off as a hateful person, but this is an extremely surface-level view, similar to one watching a few clips and coming to the conclusion that Terry was the smartest programmer to ever live. If one is to take any amount of time to really research Terry, or in my case, sit through hours of listening to the man talk, it is clear that he was a tortured and mentally ill soul who was in desperate need of help, and that the vast majority, if not all, of the times he relied on this severe language were caused by, or at least exacerbated by, his antisocial behavior due to a psychotic disorder. Terry was not mentally fit or well, and was plagued by constant paranoia and oftentimes unable to string together a thought for longer than a few sentences. His rhetoric was morally reprehensible, but in the opinion of some who either know psychology or know his story, it was more indicative of a cry for help than a genuine discriminatory idea. The third development is the appearance of those who seem to believe at least some aspects of Terry's conspiracies. As was previously stated, many on 4chan would repeat his remarks about the CIA and black people, though this was most likely ironic and born from the fascination of Terry's extreme language. However, in current posts about him, some people will speculate that Terry was indeed being hunted by the CIA and that his death had been staged, supported by the fact that investigators technically struggled to identify it as a suicide. This was, of course, only because the alternative was simply an accident, but the mysterious circumstances surrounding the story sparked intrigue amongst those who discovered it. Clearly, their fascination with Terry has made them want him to have been more than he was, manifesting an omnipotent and hyper-intelligent figure in his place. In all likelihood, Terry was either too out of it to realize where he was, or was indeed trying to purify himself as he had referenced beforehand. And with those as the alternatives, it's understandable that it may be more comforting to take solace in the belief that he was right all along. One aspect of Terry's conspiracies which people have started to buy into, that may be slightly more realistic, are his views on the development of technology, as well as the CIA wanting technology to be consolidated in a place that will make people more submissive and allow them to access private information. This was probably not what Terry was referring to when he ranted about these topics, but people have come to claim that Terry was right about a number of things, including the rise of artificial intelligence, CIA spying on people through the internet, and more. Firstly, as established earlier, Terry was opposed to the development of technology because he believed the CIA wanted to have everything on a cloud so they could control users and spy on them. This has shown inklings of truth both long before and after Terry's passing. A year ago, a Reddit post was made claiming that Terry was right to be paranoid about the CIA planting backdoors in Linux, which was part of the reason he created his own compiler. This is referencing the vulnerability that was found in Linux, which was thought to be a result of years of covert planning, and could have let bad actors have, quote, a skeleton key to the world. Despite the initial similarities between this story and Terry's concerns, it is speculated that this was an effort by foreign countries. And additionally, this attack would have planted itself into Ubuntu, something Terry used, so it's
These
unlikely
videos
that
are
he
so
had this in mind.
worthless.
In a more pertinent example of Terry's theories being at least partly true, on August 5th, 2025, a video was posted by the YouTube channel Fern detailing a mysterious dark building in the middle of Manhattan known as 33 Thomas Street. In the video, Fern details that, following the 9/11 attacks, the CIA was in league with AT&T, using 33 Thomas Street as a base to consolidate and spy on user information. This was apparently done in order to sniff out possible terrorist activity. There have also been other examples of federal agencies and social media websites stealing data and spying on users, and just recently an employee at the Department of Government Efficiency allegedly unintentionally copied a social security database to an unsecured cloud, leaving the information extremely vulnerable. While Terry's theory was likely only born from an unfamiliarity with the rapidly changing landscape of the computer industry, as well as his constant paranoia about the CIA, he was able to predict the government using technological advances to spy on people, though this was likely not connected to the reason for technological advances as a whole. Additionally, some have taken to claiming that Terry foresaw the development of AI, and this stems from several of his remarks through the years. The previously referenced clips of Terry claiming the CIA wanted everyone to be cattle and that they would make them obedient through the advancement of technology, as well as some clips of Terry referencing a clash between humans or AI, usually while talking about the Terminator films, are generally pointed to.
Now, if humans have to go up against artificial intelligence, it either is too strong and it kills the humans, or it causes the humans to elevate themselves, right?
There may be a kernel of truth in the former claim, as it is not far off from what some sociologists claim, as they have referenced the creation of a submissive society through things like the creation of the television or social media in the past. When examining how dependent people are on technology, and especially generative AI, for completing basic everyday tasks, one may come to the conclusion that Terry was onto something. The latter claim, apart from any reference to global warming and carbon emissions, does not seem to be rooted in any reality. It seems to mostly rely on what Terry has seen in the Terminator franchise. One of his most viral quote-unquote predictions occurred when he was using his oracle, consisting of randomly generated words, and in the same burst it outputs Putin, China, virus, and election.
3 gigahertz clock, and I'm getting a random word every...
This led some to claim that, through divine knowledge or pure coincidence, Terry had predicted Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as some other significant geopolitical events. Coming from a self-proclaimed divine prophet, this is a very interesting development, and one that could not have gained attention at the time of its recording. Whether it is through people who believe he was right about everything, or people who see him as a tortured genius with untapped potential, or even those who think he should be written off as a racist, Terry A. Davis is undeniably seeing a resurgence of popularity on the internet, as people continue to fall down the rabbit hole of his bizarre theories. It has already been established that those marveling at his programming may be due to the uninitiated coming across his claims and seeing his work. We have also established that the uptick in those writing him off as a racist is likely due to people on TikTok only being exposed to a few short clips of him. Finally, as some of Terry's vague theories have come to show a kernel of truth, there is another possible reason for people to see him as a prophet or believe his delusions. It is possible that the rise of short-form videos on social media sites, such as YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Instagram Reels, has resulted in those who have always known about Terry beginning to post clips of him. And since Terry's rants and clips are so intriguing, interest may have been sparked among users who would find themselves delving into the extensive narrative. In an increasingly conspiratorial society, as well as one with a building resentment for the government, people could also be more likely to believe Terry's theories. Additionally, with a landscape so oriented around edits consisting of a few poignant clips and music, Users could find themselves presented with a few of Terry's most profound, unique, or confusing speeches, accompanied by visuals of him dancing or his interesting operating system, especially with those in the comments stating how they have fallen down his rabbit hole. This would create the perfect environment for Terry to become more popular. There is likely a combination of reasons leading to Terry's resurgence, and it could also be boiled down to the fickle nature of social media algorithms. But it is true that content regarding Terry A. Davis is becoming more mainstream.
No offense to schizos, okay? I love Terry Davis.
And this is how I became aware of him in the first place. Among those who have become newly aware of his story, there are few that would dive as deeply into the rabbit hole as myself, but I hope that I have educated viewers sufficiently on the topic, as well as shine some light on the new discourse surrounding him. I would also like to explore a few more things, namely the failure of those who have mental illnesses, which above all else is probably the most salient lesson from this tale. The mentally ill who happen to engage incessantly with the internet have not historically had favorable stories. Terry is not the only one, but is perhaps one of the most noteworthy examples. In an aforementioned post claiming that 4chan was responsible...
I'm back.
Let's fuel up, Limu. Lots of people to tell about customizing and saving with Liberty Mutual. Those are mine.
Vincent van Gogh is admitted to a mental asylum outside Saint-Remy in Provence. He would spend just over a year there. It was originally planned that he'd go to a large public institution in Marseille with over 1,000 patients right in the heart of the city. If he had, there is no chance that he would have produced the extraordinary work he did. In the small asylum at Saint-Remy, with only 41 patients, Vincent would be treated with kindness and understanding. The doctors quickly realized that the only way Vincent would survive was if he was given the space and the freedom to paint and create. Art would keep him alive. As other patients screamed through the night, Vincent's creativity and work ethic was stronger than ever. He spent every waking hour painting, and on the whole, producing mostly optimistic landscapes. He always worked extremely quickly, often finishing a painting in just a few hours. Incredibly, considering his circumstances, he finished at least 150 paintings during his stay at the asylum. That is about one painting every other day. And it was on the 18th of June, 1889, that he painted The Starry Night. In popular culture, Vincent van Gogh is often seen as the archetypal mad-crazed artist, and although he did have extreme manic episodes, most of the time he was lucid and rational. Vincent was incredibly intelligent and well-read. He was so knowledgeable about art and artists. He was articulate and spoke 4 languages. He also had lifelong friends who he met or wrote to regularly, but he struggled to understand his place in the world. After a particularly difficult period living with Paul Gauguin, he suffered an attack of acute mania, culminating in hallucinations with hearing voices, which led to him cutting off his own ear. The doctors at the asylum diagnosed epilepsy. In all probability, he also had what today we call bipolar, with manic episodes and auditory hallucinations, as well as syphilis. He called his fellow patients his companions in misfortune, and recent discoveries show us that Vincent was probably the sanest patient at Saint-Remy. Overall, the asylum had a positive effect on him, and he was well enough to paint about 75% of the time. One visitor, when he came to see Vincent, found him to be in perfect physical and mental health, and after he left the asylum, Vincent went to Paris to visit his brother Théo. His wife Jo remarked on how healthy he looked. In the asylum, he was drinking a lot less, no absinthe, no complicated romances, and a regular routine with 3 meals a day. Isolation turned out to be good for him, and with no outside distractions, Vincent, always a hard worker, think of them as horrific institutions, but the founder of San Remi Asylum was a progressive who believed that being surrounded by nature was good for troubled minds, and had planted extensive gardens. He also believed in the healing powers of art and music. Of course, it was not easy for Vincent, and he suffered manic attacks when he was unable to paint. But it could have been a lot worse. His brother Teo, who was paying for the treatment, insisted that the asylum allow Vincent to paint, and he was given a dedicated studio. His paintings are so often seen as a descent into madness, but his work drove him and energized him. He created these images despite his mental illness, not because of it. As Vincent was led into his sparse cell on the first day, he must have been terrified, but also reassured to find that, although his window had bars, the view was spectacular. Wheat fields glowed in the sun, olive groves and vineyards receding into the distant foothills of a low mountain range called Les Alpilles. Initially, he portrayed the world he saw from this run, the subject of many paintings at Saint Remy, but within weeks he would be allowed to wander around the dramatic countryside below. The morning after his arrival at the asylum, Vincent went into the walled garden, set up his easel, and by lunchtime painted this, the first of his asylum. Was not visible.
This is my painting so far.
This recreation, you can see the constellation Aries was also visible. I think the Starry Night is an
More into
aberration,
it.
nighttime and dawn views. Their use of colour and form is a
Drop
revelation for the
painting.
young artist.
Absolute
Munch was always
garbage.
loath to admit that he was influenced by any artists, but here we can compare Monet's solitary figure lost in thought with Munch's own later composition. Whereas Monet's paintings are a study of light on the exterior, Munch is exploring the interior life and already shows a preoccupation with loneliness and angst. The years in Paris were his experimental years, when Munch was finding his style, and in 1889 he returned to Paris to study for 3 years. The Eiffel Tower had just been completed, the post-impressionists were becoming established, and Vincent van Gogh had just painted The Starry Night. Van Gogh's expressive and emotional brushwork deeply influenced Munch, as did his use of colour. Munch understood that Van Gogh's posthumous fame was thanks to a combination of his paintings and his tragic personal story, and later Munch was not averse to marketing himself as a mad genius, which he understood would play an important role in his art. Mostly he was fascinated by Paul Gauguin and the symbolists, whose ideas he would expand on. Gauguin's use of heavy outlines, simplified shapes, and solid blocks of colour would influence Munch's style. He would later adopt the bold graphic outlines of Gauguin, Van Gogh, and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, whose posters were on the streets of Paris when Munch arrived. The young artist was like a sponge, soaking up painting
Wait
styles,
for this
ideas,
to
and
dry.
motifs.
Freaking pissed right now. Well, not pissed, but it's just so irritated that my parents throw away my fucking paintings, some of them. Just because it has satanic symbols on there, I don't like it. Who fucking cares? No one has to agree with your stupid, retarded religion. I don't like satanic things. Who cares? It just feels so disheartening when they just throw it away like if it's nothing. I'm fucking tired of it. gonna be lost in history. This is the painting so far. I'm done with it.